Hello, everybody. Welcome to Astrology Unplugged. I'm Rick DiClemente, your host. And tonight we're going to get back to part two of this program that Deneen Joyner has constructed. And we're her guinea pigs last week and this week. Remember, Deneen is an ancestral trauma expert, and she will have the floor most of this meeting. But I did want to start out tonight and mention something to you that's been on my mind recently. And it gets to my mind every now and then. And it's a question many non-astrologers have all the time. And it's called electional astrology, which means, hey, Rick, tell me when to start this business. Hey, Rick, tell me when to sell this house. Hey, Rick, tell me when to do this. Tell me when to do that. And I've thought about this a lot. And there have been many marriages that I've given them a time frame to get married. I have told people when to start their business. And it is a common type of astrology called electional astrology. But I wanted to mention to you tonight before we get to Deneen, largely just let it happen when it's going to happen. That's what I have learned after a long time. So, for instance, when you're new at astrology and you see Mars coming and you're about to go see your doctor, there's a real tendency to go, oh, and hide. There's a real tendency to do that when you're new. What I've learned is when the planet wants you, it's going to get you anyway. It's that simple. If it wants you, it's going to get you anyway. And in most cases, it's going to be okay. So, in most cases, what I have found, if you are getting married to somebody, you are going to get married when the planets are in such a position that it matches who you two really are. Not who you want to be, but who you really are. It's just going to happen. The preacher's going to be late. They're going to be late with the music. Something's going to happen early. It's going to rain. It's going to end up working out where you're going to get married or you're going to start a business that matches who you are. So ultimately, don't worry about it. Just get married when you feel like getting married. And boy, it's taking a lot of the weight off my shoulders. Let's welcome back our host for tonight. Our guest host is Deneen Joyner. Deneen, thank you for coming back to finish up part two. Let's get you unmuted. There you are.
Yes.
It's all
Good
yours.
evening.
And what are you going to talk about tonight?
Yes. So did you give me the controls so that I can
Oh,
pull
I'm
up
going to
my
do that. I'm going to do that
Okay.
right now. And now you've got it.
Wonderful. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming back for part two of All in the Family, an introduction to generational curses. We are going to do a quick review for anybody who didn't have the opportunity to join in part one, just so that we're all on the same page and have the same knowing. And then we're going to actually just move into part two. So give me a second just to queue up my PowerPoint. Okay. All right. So I'm assuming you guys can see this because I can't
Yes,
see you.
we can see the man kissing the baby.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. Okay, so this is the course that we are in. These are the course goals, which are to learn what generational curses are and how they're passed down. We're also going to be able to identify your own family's generational curses. And then lastly, I'm hoping that I will inspire curiosity moving forward. So hopefully this won't be it. This is just the beginning of your curiosity and doing more work around you and your family's emotional framework. I want to talk to you first about a spiritual inheritance. This is what I call collectively everything that I have outlined here. The course focus is on generational curses. So I'm just going to read you the definition of spiritual inheritance. It is the passing down of ancestry, generational curses, family karma, soul wounds, emotional genealogy, and generational blessings inherited from ancestors of a specific family to its descendants. This evening, we're going to focus our efforts on generational curses. If you just look at this picture and you think of your family, I mean, you can just see that basically this goes beyond you and then some, and then some, and then some. So people that you never even have come into contact with, maybe you've heard stories about these people that you are blood related to. Maybe you do know some of them who span back several generations. But I want you to think really beyond those people that you have come to know and love. I want you to know that this started way, 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 way long ago. Let's talk about what generational curse is. A generational curse is the unresolved and unhealed emotional pain and trauma left behind by ancestors that is passed down through DNA to descendants. It's similar to inherited traits and characteristics and will manifest itself differently and similarly in family members. I gave the example last time we met about hair color, eye color, those who are left-handed, right-handed, traits such as that. Those are things that we really don't think second about, but I want you to think about generational curses in the same vein as that. The same vein that you would inherit these traits and characteristics, you too would also inherit generational curses. I want you to know that no one is exempt from generational curses. They can show up in your parents, your grandparents, you, your siblings, your children, and extended family members. So everybody has a piece of the generational curse. We have a list of generational curses here. These are the ones that I have come to know and understand in my 25-year plus career working with children and families in trauma. When we did our work together the last time we were here, we added some other curses to the list. And I those, but I also want you to really think about your own family as we move through this and even beyond our time together. There's going to be instances when you're going to say, oh, wow, yeah, I need to add this on as well. I want you really to be motivated to come up with your own list. This is just really an example of those things, as I just stated, that I have come into contact with in my career working with children and families. But as you already know, when we met the first time, these are things that will become more personal to you and your family. And you all have really, really did some good work in adding to this list. So just take a minute right now and just kind of look at this list again. And while you're looking at it and revisiting these curses, I also want to add just a few things that we also identified with this list, which had everything to do with being descendants of immigrants and also people who, along with slavery, are descendants of possibly the Holocaust and different atrocities such as that. Um, we also identified that there possibly could be a series of unfortunate deaths in the family for whatever reason. This seems to be a curse where, people in the family mysteriously die from something um, or just don't make it past a certain age. We also talked about possibly pregnancies, not actually carrying a pregnancy to term. We talked about SIDS possibly, which is sudden infant death syndrome. So things of that. And so if there's anything else that possibly I missed, because this list, as I mentioned, is exhaustive for sure. I want you to make sure that you take the moment right now to actually look at your list, which was something that I asked you to do to kind of keep handy, and just take a minute and make sure that you're capturing the curses that are unique to you and your family. So I'll leave this up for just a second. Okay, so now we're moving into part two of the course. And when we last were together, Rick actually stated the question, well, how do we even get the curse? How is it passed down to us? And that's where we ended. So we're literally picking up from his question, which is really exciting for me because I want you to really get um, the idea of how this actually is genetically passed on. So there's something called epigenetics, if I could get that out, epigenetics. And I welcome you to take um, notice and research this on your own. You're going to learn that it is the study of trauma on a gene and how it's replicated, just like similar to the characteristics that I mentioned of our hair color, skin color, and all of the other characteristics and traits that make you unique and also make your family unique. So, if you want to research more on that, you're going to get a wealth of information, and it's fairly new as far as the study of it. There is some information, but they're still developing that information, and it's really really trending right now. I want to take you through what happens. I want you to think about, again, long long ago, before you were even here, your parents were here, your grandparents, and so on and so forth. So I want to take you through what it looks like to actually have this generational curse or spiritual inheritance that I like to call it, how it actually came to be. So we're going to start with what is called the compilation of this generational curse. And the definition of a compilation is the action or process of producing something. So that's what we're speaking of right now. How did this curse become? So your ancestor experienced something painful or traumatic. A painful or traumatic event occurred way back when with one of your ancestors. And in that moment, their genes specific to your family became chemically altered and therefore changed the way it emotionally expresses itself. So it was whole, it was functioning the way it normally would function, and then something happened painfully and traumatically so that literally chemically altered the gene. The event was left unresolved and unhealed. And I'm sure we all can identify with that. We're all carrying something that we have not resolved or healed yet from our own lifetime, our own existence. And this was no different for from our ancestors. So they too had their painful and traumatic events happen to them. Maybe some of them tried to heal, maybe some of them didn't. However, the leftover was what was inherited to us. So, through DNA replication, a descendant inherits the unresolved and unhealed gene known as the generational curse. This curse then influences the family's emotional expression, their emotional framework. This expression becomes the family's karma. Karma is the destiny, the fate, and sum of an ancestor's previous actions. So we hear of karma all the time and how we pretty much use it in the vein of somebody does something bad to us and karma will take care of them. It's kind of like a 360. This is the same thing when we're speaking of karma, this unresolved, unhealed curse that is literally living and breathing in the DNA of your family. And so, because it hasn't been healed yet, it lays within your family's emotional framework. So, these generational curses are now alive within the family, collectively and individually. And this is something that, again, we're not really thinking about. When you go through something painful and traumatic of your own, you're not thinking about your ancestor. You're not thinking that, oh, this possibly was passed down to me. And that's why I'm experiencing it as well, because they didn't heal it. Most people are just caught in their own funnel of pain and trauma. So, what happens is because it hasn't been healed, it expresses itself through a number of different ways. The first is something called a family constellation. And I believe we talked a little bit about this. I could be wrong, but we talked a little bit about family constellations. There's a gentleman by the name of Mark Wolin who actually studies family constellations and has done a lot of work in the Pittsburgh University of Pittsburgh, and has written a book, and it's really fascinating. So that's something you might want to look up as well. But family constellations is really similar to that if you think about the stars that align. And actually, um, if you think about the Big Dipper, the Little Dipper, it actually, when the stars come together collectively, they're actually creating a picture. So, just like that, family constellations in your family literally is an unconscious thing that happens. The example that I use is like if you have a family gathering, you just probably experience Thanksgiving. And so sometimes what happens unconsciously is that people are just drawn to each other within your family. And these same people tend to just cluster, and that clustering has something to do with the unconscious, unresolved things that they have experienced that they know nothing about. They haven't really talked about their experiences, but unconsciously, their souls are aligning just like the constellations. And I bet if you were to talk to those people who tend to cluster, they probably would have some similarities as far as what they have experienced. So it's really, really interesting when you start to look at your family. Probably after this, you'll be more consciously aware and start to see people cluster and maybe start to think about what we're talking about this evening. The other is something called a trauma bond. And I have been hearing about this a lot lately. I'm sure you have too in social media. And the trauma bond really is something that happens outside of the family, more so with people that you don't know. The example that I like to use for this would be somebody who possibly is receiving some form of rehabilitation. It could be alcohol or drug addiction. And these people tend to, because of their trauma, over addiction, they tend to bond together because I get you, you get me. There's not a whole lot that I have to fill in for you. And we just kind of experience whatever it is that we have gone through, whatever we're trying to overcome, and it becomes a bond. These trauma bonds are really something that people need to be mindful of, especially because of the bond over trauma. You want to make sure that, someone who is bonding with someone else in trauma is actually also receiving some form of therapy, some outside resource to make sure that they are actually being rehabilitated and not actually just staying within the trauma and actually living near with each other because of that. I know you all know about the black sheep. The black sheep in the family is another expression of the generational curse. The black sheep tends to be the person who is on the outside looking in, if you will. There is usually one within a family. There may be more than one, but generally there's always just one person who seems to look upon the family and can really see the crazy. They are the one who really can look at the family and wants more for the family. They are the one who um, really can see the emotional genealogy that is played out within the family without even doing any extensive work. So they're in the know about all of the things that have transpired that have really held the family back. They know about the unresolved healing that needs to happen. And so they're the advocate. They really want the family to be healthy and whole. The last one that I want to touch on is called soul wounds. And then I'm going to take a break and actually help you kind of process and digest what I've actually offered you. But the soul wound is the last part of this expression. And we're going to get into this a little deeper, but that has everything to do with you, your relationship with the generational curse within your own family system. I mentioned in part one that everybody has a piece of this generational curse. It is something that impacts everybody, but it can impact everybody differently. And so, because of that, you may have a household with mom and dad and say four siblings, and maybe each sibling has been impacted differently by different generational curses. They may also be impacted by the same generational curse, but again, still have different soul wounds because of it. And I will give you examples in a minute. But before I get into anything more deeply, I want to see if there are any questions in the chat, and or if anybody wants to ask me any questions on their own.
Go ahead, Rick.
I think we may have mentioned something, and I can't remember you covering it here in the review. Earthquake, flood, fire, survival, and trauma of catastrophe. How
Yes.
is there an easy way to link that all together?
I don't,
Catastrophic?
right. Yeah, maybe that. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. I think that pretty much sums that up. And
Okay.
I think for sure, using that as as a potential curse where you can actually look at your family's history and you can see that there has been these instances where your family has literally had to pick up and rebuild itself over and over again. And because of that, because of that curse where you're having to pick up and rebuild over and over again, if you were to look at the soul wounds from that, which we'll get to in a minute, but that might create some anxiety in some of the descendants, unknowingly, possibly. Maybe there's been a foundation of anxiety and nobody really has done due diligence to find out why there seems to be a pattern of anxiety in the family, or why there seems to be a pattern of homelessness, because possibly maybe the anxiety that hasn't been truly identified and actually looked at could actually look like homelessness. It could look like somebody being proactive, actually picking up and leaving before it happens. So, if you are looking at your family's history in a way where you're starting to see patterns that you didn't see before, because now the focus is on the emotional genealogy, which is what I call it, then
Mhm.
you're going to start to see it come to life. And then maybe possibly you can start to see how it impacted your family system, the family that you grew up in. And then you can start to identify your generational curses, your spiritual inheritance. And then what you can do is look at that and see what has impacted you personally from this list, if that makes sense. Peggy.
Hi. So I guess I'm the black sheep, and my family has gone through all that. And my father bailed out at 62. He died young. And then my mother never, we talked, but she never dealt with it. And then she died. And my brother bailed out. He ran away from the family scenario. He's out there. And I've finally come to grips with it all because I've seen what it did to everybody, plus me. So
Yeah.
what do you do when you finally just get to the end and go, okay, that's all the curses. They all gave up. I dealt with it. What does that tell you? I mean, will they we had no children, my brother and I.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
and the rest of my family is pretty much died off. So are all our generational curses at the dead end and done? There's nobody to send it forward with.
Wow.
Is
Yeah.
that our souls will now just carry that on to whatever we come on to next?
What I would say, Peggy, is, to definitely there's still work to be done, even though it sounds like you're the sole heir of everything. I would, and I'm a black sheep as well. So I definitely get the onus being on you, and how you're feeling about everything being on you, but it is on you, figuratively and literally, it's on you. And so, what I would encourage you to do is really, even though it is still you, is to look at your list, to create your generational curse list, and really look at it, and actually look at the things that have impacted your family, regardless if they're here or not. And then again, look at what has impacted you as a child and now as a woman. And actually look at it and see. We're about to get into that in a second, but look at it and see how far you have come with actually healing it. Because more than likely, once you actually do the work to identify the curses that were in your family, and the ones that weren't healed, more than likely there's still some work to be done on your behalf, because now it's truly on you to heal yourself. Um, Many people have other people that they're thinking about healing, but you have the luxury, literally, to really just kind of focus in on you and yourself, which is rare. So I would definitely use all the power that you have right now to literally look at what it is that you can heal, and what you can focus on. So literally that your soul can be free.
Okay.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Let's go to Rick has his hand raised.
Deneen, I'm wondering, is there um, a surprising number of people who have sublimated their awareness out of defense and only think they've been traumatized lightly until they get into the work and start to uncover a huge list?
Yes. Yes.
Do you address that at some point and say anything about it?
Oh, most definitely. We talked about, the soul readings that I do. And, for anybody who doesn't know what a soul reading is, I don't want to take up a whole lot of time, but I really encourage you to visit my website, which is my name, DeneenJoyner.com. The soul reading is the first offering on my website. And I just want you to go there, spend some time and read over what a soul reading is. But basically, in short, my soul readings literally will provide anyone with a blueprint of their soul and where it has been painfully and traumatically so, as an individual and as well as within your family. So it's going to give that emotional genealogy that I'm speaking of, as far as the origin of your family's emotional history and how it has impacted you as a person. And it's also going to give you your soul lessons, which are really important for anyone who wants to heal. And so, for you to be able to actually start your healing journey and to be mindful and consciously aware of what it is that you need to work on, the soul lessons are identified for you. So, literally, it's a cheat sheet of what to look for in your everyday life, because there's going to be lessons, have been lessons that have been presented to you, and you really just didn't know that they were your lessons. And so they just came and went and came and went. And that's what happens until you literally can pause and say, oh, this is one of my lessons. And how am I going to respond, not react to it? Because when we react, that means that we're not consciously aware and we just continue the vicious cycle. When you respond, that means that you are consciously aware and that you are really striving on elevating your awakening and your healing. So the soul reading is going to help you identify a lot of things. And I do encounter people who will do a consultation with me. They don't know why they found me. They will tell me that they had the perfect childhood, that there were no issues at all in their family. However, because I can connect to them temporarily, I pretty much am already starting to feel things. And so I will just ask them, well, how was your relationship with your father? And even just a simple question like that can sometimes lead to more. And then we can kind of open the door to that it wasn't a perfect childhood. That was the cover story, if you will. That's the story that we all have. If you've been through any form of trauma or any form of pain, that created, any type of angst or turmoil as a child, we developed a cover story. We had to, in order for us to get through. So that was the story that you told yourself about whatever event that happened, either directly or indirectly. And that's the story that you had to tell yourself. And so you would be surprised that there are a lot of adults who are still carrying this cover story and they're unaware. It's an unconscious thing. And then when they come to me, they're able to literally start to tell the story, which is their truth.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Let's move on to Renate has her hand raised.
Yes, hello. I sent you a
Hello.
mail, Doreen. I sent you a mail, but I think I need a personal thing.
Yes.
What goes
Okay.
to my family or my mother and I, we have fear or anxiety. My mother said she had her whole life. With me, it started at 55 and is still on. And the thing, I'm coming from Germany, born at the beginning of the Second World War. And my mother was born on the beginning of the First World War. And there are some similarities. When I was born, one of my grandfathers died. And when our only child was born, the grandmother died after a week. So I don't know if that means something. I have more the feeling our only son is a black sheep of the family, and he is the last one. He isn't married and doesn't intend to have no children. And when I look at his horoscope, I just see it looks like he has the karma of both families.
Yes.
My ex-husband, who is not alive any longer, and of our family, because there were secrets, endless secrets, with cheating and born child that are not the father, and all that. It's packed. In both
Yes.
families, I did some family constellations already back in Germany and one here in Canada. And but I have PTSD. I still have traumas and cannot fully live, and I'm fed up with that, you know.
Yes. Yes. Well, I definitely want to make sure that I get your information before we end this evening so that I can follow up with you. I definitely have been thinking about you and was looking forward to connecting with you. So I'll make sure that I get your information for sure. But it feels like, a lot of what you're speaking of with your own personal experience with fear and the post traumatic, a lot of it, believe it or not, it feels like it's not yours. It feels like it has been inherited, which is what we're talking about this evening.
That's
It
what I
feels like,
feel, yeah.
yes, it feels like, in fact, I have chills, so that means
I get chills
confirmation.
too.
Okay. So whenever I get chills, that's confirmation for me. So it
Me too.
definitely is telling me that you have been carrying someone else's burden and they have placed it on your life with the hopes that you would heal it.
Yeah.
Yes. So
And I
that is
did.
what you've been experiencing. So let's make sure that we talk, that we connect beyond here so that I can help you.
What is your
Okay.
email for people?
Okay, yeah. Let me put it in right now.
Well, you need to put it so that everybody can see it.
I will.
What is the email?
Oh, okay. You're gonna type it in?
Yeah, I'll put it in somewhere.
Okay. It's just my name, Deneen at DeneenJoyner.com.
Deneen
I got
at
that.
DeneenJoyner.com. And tonight,
Correct.
when I shut off the recording, before I shut off the session, we can talk freely about making connections and what you need to do. But most of this can be accomplished by going to her website, which is DeneenJoyner.com.
Yes.
Waldo was next with his hand raised. Thank you, Renate.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Go ahead, Waldo.
Hello, Denise.
Hello.
How are you? Thank you for
Good, good. Happy birthday.
as I was in the last class, but I saw the video, so I got the list, and I was wondering because on the list, I mean, it's like 6 or 7 things that I could put
Yes.
under a different type of like us the we decide to come out of the closet and be living our real sexual life, you know. And I think I'm the first one in both family trees that decided to live a life that is not a lie, you know, that is really get married with the person that you want to marry, you know, especially to stop abuse, addictions, abandonment, illnesses, because every time a lot of people that do not marry who they want to marry and they go by the family tree, they have all these symptoms, all these curses, like you call it. I like to call mine, instead of curse, I like to call a blessing in disguise, because it is a blessing to work, be part of working the family tree to liberate maybe
Yes.
the next generations, you know. So
Mhm.
so I call these curses, some of them, and a lot of them seems like very like suicide or racism or even the addiction that most of us has those in the families. But I think it's because of something bigger than not being living your love life like you want to be, or you be afraid to confront family and society. Because
Yes.
I think most of these things now go outside of the family and become a collective generational work to do. In my
Yes.
case, I did that way. I work a lot with the 12th house in my horoscope. I have Pluto in the 12th house, so I seem to draw people that have all these issues, or at least the most of them. I draw these people to my life, and I've been working a lot closer for them. Very close. I have all these people, and they open up to me very easy. It seems like I'm like a magnet for these people in my life. But
Good.
I understand, because I'm coming from that line of addiction and divorce and all kind of stuff, so I could deal with it. But I found that along my life that a lot of people, the main issue is that they don't live a true life.
Yes.
It's not because all this is one thing another. No, all this can be in one group, but it's one major thing in the family. Somebody, maybe my grandfather, my great grandparent, it was an issue there. Or maybe my life in another incarnation, I was doing the abuse.
Right.
So I just wanted to put this stuff there, because in your list I don't see anything related to homosexuality or which is the issue that take a lot of people to suicide, and take a lot of people to do even sexual abuse, even people in sexual abuse, because they could not express their sexuality.
Yes, and thank you for sharing that. And definitely you can, that's something that you can be specific to your list. And I really commend you, for the work that you have done. The work that you have done on yourself, you're leaving for future generations of your family. So, so they won't have to take up the cross, so to speak, because of the work that you have done openly and in truth.
Well, the society is getting, I'm seeing a lot of things happening now than 20 years ago. Nobody speak about it,
Right.
You don't see anybody getting married everywhere like now, so I think it's a collective curse is really getting very open.
It's improving. It's improving. Yes.
Yes, it is. It is, for sure.
And that's in a lot of things, I just pick one thing because I live that, and I could be a example of it, but it's many things. I'm a Sagittarius, but I have my Scorpio traumas a lot. I could talk all night about that one, but I don't want to get into it.
Right.
Deneen, one thing I've noticed in my family, and I didn't see on the list, and I do see it with a lot of clients, is the word jealousy. I see a lot of jealousy being handed down from one generation to the next, all done quietly. But somebody's really jealous of something, and it has a cascading effect. That's passed on, where the person's afraid to be themselves because they're jealous of that, and they think somebody's jealous of them, and it's all happening very quietly. And I'm definitely seeing that improve. Have you noticed that?
Not so much. I have a list that we're actually about to look at, which is going to help everybody kind of start to frame their own experience with their soul wounds. So let's see if we see it on the list.
All right.
Because maybe we might be able to actually identify it a little bit more if we can do that. So how about if we jump into that right now, and then I'll come back and take more questions, because I'm almost certain it's going to bring up some more questions. So we'll do that now. Okay, so I need for you to either use your phone or use the list that you created, possible for it sounds like some of you have already started to develop your own lists. So remember, this is just to get you started. You probably have some of these, maybe a few of them, and then you have already started to come away from this list and kind of start your own. So I need you to do that. If you haven't, I'm going to give you a second or two. Don't feel pressured if you don't have a whole list to work with. Even if you're able to just pull one thing from this list or one of your own, I want you to be able to use that to move forward, because I'm going to give you a little bit of homework while we're here. Okay, so you heard me talk about these soul wounds. And I want to just really, really revisit that and make sure that you're in the know about what this means for you as it relates to this spiritual inheritance or generational curse, if you will. So remember, the curse has been given to you by one of your descendants, excuse me, one of your ancestors as a descendant. You've inherited this unconsciously. Now that we have the list, we can kind of figure out what it is that we've been living with within our own family system. So once you're able to actually identify what you grew up with, what your family consistently showed you based on the list of experiences, then what you can do now is to start to identify your own impact from these curses, which are called soul wounds. So I took 3 off the list. Okay. I took 3 of the curses that were identified, and I started to actually look at them as soul wounds. So the first one is abuse. So if we look at abuse in any form, it could be physical, it could be sexual, it could be verbal, it could be financial, and maybe some other ones that I don't even know about. But um, this is the one we're going to be working with. So abuse. The other one is abandonment. That could be emotional or physical. And then poverty. That could be a lack in food, clothing, shelter. You don't have to memorize this. I'm just using this as an example because you're actually going to do your own in a minute. Okay. So if we were looking at the soul wound for sexual abuse, and we actually started to look at a list of things that actually would be in description emotionally of how someone might feel if they actually had been exposed to some form of sexual abuse within their family, within their home. This is a whole laundry list of things that one might feel if they had been impacted. Okay. So you can see there's, oh my goodness, there's a lot. There's a lot of emotionally reactive words here that you could draw from. And we're going to be working with this list. So again, you don't have to memorize it. If you want to screenshot it so that you have it handy, that would probably be good so that you can see it. And then the same thing for abandonment, the same thing for the poverty. And I'm going to show you how we're going to actually work this. So we're looking at sexual abuse, we're looking at abandonment, and we're looking at poverty as the curses. And now we're trying to identify how these 3 curses might impact somebody on a personal level, which becomes their soul wound. Okay. So these are the ones that I identified. Okay. Yours may be different. If these were your curses, you might draw from a different experience. Remember, I told you everybody has their own personal impact of how things related to them when they were growing up. It might be different from your sibling. It might be different from your cousin. It might be different from your friend. It might be different from your wife or your husband or your mate. Okay. So if we were looking at the curse, sexual abuse, and we were looking for the emotion of how somebody might feel as a result, maybe they would feel ashamed on some level. I've worked with a lot of people who have been sexually assaulted, sexually abused um, within their childhood and also their adulthood. And the consistent feeling that is described is shame. They feel shame. If we look at abandonment, the word that I pulled from here was rejection. Somebody who's been abandoned either physically or emotionally doesn't feel accepted. They feel rejected on some level. They feel like there's something wrong with them because they're not accepted. They weren't taken care of. They weren't loved on, so they feel rejected, possibly. Maybe you might have a different description if this is your curse or your inheritance. Then the last one is poverty. How might somebody feel if this was the curse within their home? This was what was presented to them as a child growing up, that they didn't have enough. Maybe they might feel neglected on some level or all levels because their needs weren't met, whatever that looked like. And at the end of the day, they felt neglected on some level. Let's heal so we can stop accidentally hurting people we want to love because we are projecting our own wounds onto them. Before we get into this next few minutes, I actually want to come out of this and just really make sure that you're understanding what the soul wounds are, that you're actually looking at starting to identify yours, and then we're going to actually move into how we start to heal.
Oh, it's gone.
Okay. So we're back. So are there any questions about how we move from the impact, the personal impact from growing up in a household with the ones that you have identified within your own family system? What I want you to do is for you to start to identify how those curses impacted you as a person. Not look at your family collectively, but just zone in on you right now. And maybe just pick one or two, you know, one is probably good for this evening. And then later on, I definitely would encourage you to look at the ones that you have identified for your family and really, really just lean into how they have impacted you. Maybe you're going to find that some of them didn't impact you. And that's possible because remember, I told you, you're not going to have all of them possibly impact you, but you will have some of them. So if you walk away with like Rick's question to me, which is that you can identify maybe 6 or 7 of them, and at the end of the day, you're looking at your list and you're saying, "Oh, I'm good. I didn't have anything." I want you to really, really sit with them again. Okay? Because more than likely they have. And maybe again, you have that defense up where you're still protecting your story, you're still protecting your emotions. You don't want to go there. So if that's the case, I want you to really, really just give yourself the opportunity to really, really sit with the list again and really lean in and say, this is what it was. This is what impacted me. And this is how it showed up for me. Okay. So I'm hoping that from your list that you've identified for your family, that now you can say how one or all of them have impacted you. You've been able to look at the list that I provided you of emotions, of how those things possibly touched you in some way. Okay. So that's now leaving you with the emotion that you're possibly carrying right now. Unless you've been actively working on healing it, then more than likely, this is probably the first time that you've ever identified that something really, really happened growing up. And now you're actually left to say, this is the aftermath of it. Now, what do I do? Which is what we're about to get to in a minute. Are there any questions about how it translates from the spiritual inheritance, which is the curse, to it actually living and breathing in your home? Okay. And it's showing up and manifesting in those lists that we developed. And then the ones that maybe possibly you have identified for your family. And then how it impacted and translated to your own experience. And now you're able to emotionally say, this is how it made me feel. Does everybody get that?
I have a question. And I've heard so much about this through the years. One of the most common of all these on the list that I've ever seen is feeling worthless,
Yes.
feeling of no value.
Yes.
When you talk about leaning into something
Mhm.
and you talk about let's fix it, it sounds to me like it always has, like it sounds easy.
Oh, yeah, no.
But how does one go about addressing once they've identified what it is? How does one go about addressing the issue so they can heal it?
Right. Okay. Well, we're about to get into that now.
Good
So
time. Good
right.
time.
It is good timing. So I appreciate that for and what you just described, just for anybody who possibly that is their emotion. The emotion is unworthiness, which is what Rick just described. That was for me one of my emotions as the aftermath of abandonment, emotional and physical, for me from my father. So when he left, when I was 11 years old, physically, he had already been gone emotionally since for my whole childhood, but he physically decided to call it quits with my mom when I was 11, which actually put the period at the end. And so for me, that is when I started to believe that there was something wrong with Deneen. So that is where the unworthiness for myself started to actually be born. Okay. So when I hear you say unworthiness, and through my work, I've been able to identify that most people who struggle with being unworthy generally has had a parent or parents who were not emotionally available to them and or physically, if that makes sense.
Yes.
So now what we're going to do, and I'll come back because we don't have a whole lot of time, but I do want to get started with how to start to um, unravel the mystery that is you with your emotions. We're going to touch on that now, and then I'll come back and take more questions. Okay, so here we go. So to answer Rick's question, how does one start to heal? Okay, and this is something that is going to take definitely a concerted effort on your part. It's going to take a commitment to really want to do things differently, to focus on things other than the pain and the suffering, if you will. What I mean by that is most people, including myself, until I made the conscious decision to undo things and to really examine things and to start to heal my life in the way that I saw myself in relationship to the pain and trauma that I've experienced, I kept focusing on the pain. I kept focusing on what I didn't get. I kept focusing on the things that happened to me. I kept focusing on my parents, what they didn't give me. And so when you do that, literally all you're doing is like that blender. It's just churning, 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 and you're not getting anywhere because you're focusing on the wrong thing. What I've done right here with the things that we identified with regards to the 3 curses that we're looking at is I want to offer you something different. Instead of focusing on what you didn't get or focusing on the pain, focusing on the emotion that we just identified for you, I want you to start to seek what I call the antidote. Okay. The antidote has everything to do with your healing and what you should be focusing on instead. Okay. So if you were to take the word that you identified, okay, now these are the 3 that I came up with regards to how it translated from the curse and actually impacted one person. Okay, if we were to look at shame and we actually looked up, so if you actually took whatever your word is, okay, whatever word that you described that was the impact, the aftermath of whatever it was that you were exposed to, okay, that was painful or traumatic, we're looking at your soul wound and we actually identified what that pain word was for you. Okay. If you were to look up the antonym, which is the opposite of whatever the word is, you're going to come up with a list of many. So, for instance, if we were looking at shame, which would be the experience that somebody would have if they had been possibly sexually abused, okay, then the some of the words that would come up for that person if they were looking for the opposite of that word might be pride, it might be dignity, and it might be empathy, empathy for themselves. So you can start to kind of see the opposite of shame would be pride, somebody who takes pride, or dignity. They have dignity on themselves and dignity on what they have been able to fulfill in their life. So they're not focusing on the shame or the experience itself. They're looking beyond that. They're looking for experiences that will allow them to have pride about themselves, to offer themselves empathy instead of shame. If we look at rejection, okay, and that was the word that was given as a result to the abandonment. Some of the words that would come up for that would be acceptance, allow, admit. So you might start to see that these words are more positive, right? They're more soothing. They're definitely more in alignment with someone who is trying to transform themselves into a different mindset, walking away from the experience. And I'm not trying to say that you want to erase the experience. That's not what this is about. This is about empowering yourself to see things in a more hopeful way. The last one is neglect. So we looked at neglect and we looked for the antidote here. We would look for cared for, possibly looked after, treated well. These are words that somebody who has not had a consistent pattern of someone caring for them or them even caring for themselves might take on the mindset of, from this day forward, I want to attract and manifest experiences that will allow me to feel cared about. I feel treated well, that people actually look after me and I look after myself versus actually staying within the same framework of neglect because you're focusing on what you didn't receive. And again, you're manifesting those experiences unconsciously because that is where your focus has been. So there is good news. I want to share good news. There is good news with all of this. And this is something that I really want to invite you to do as well. Just like I had you identify the spiritual inheritance, if you will, the curses that your family has been carrying and has been passed down, there's also generational blessings. And these generational blessings are plentiful. They are the expressions of your healing, your strengths, your resiliency, the spiritual gifts that you hold, that your family holds, the wisdom, the love, the continued covering of God's covenant over your family from generation to generation. And I really want to make sure that that is something that you explore as well, because a lot of people tend to overlook that there are blessings attached to your family's name. There are gifts, there is love, despite what you possibly have been shown. Again, just like the research you are doing now, it's uncovering things that possibly you weren't in the know about. There too are blessings, and there are gifts, and there are things that maybe you have overlooked, and maybe your family has overlooked, and really just has not given it a second thought. But there's talents that some of you in your family have, that possibly, could really come out of this if, if you start to research and look and see patterns as well of these different expressions of the gifts and the things that your family has endured as a family. I mean, you're still here. You are the descendant. And so you have survived, your family has survived. And so that speaks volumes. So I don't want you to lose sight of that. And I hope that you will explore that as well. Before I come back to you, I just want to make you aware of, just like this course that you participated in, I have a few other courses that are in the horizon. And there's going to be a QR code that you can actually use your phone to actually take the information in. And I'll also send it to Rick. So if he'll be so gracious to share it, should you not be able to do it with your phone, no worries. But these are the courses that I have coming up. They're similar in nature to this, but different on a lot of different fronts, depending on the subject matter. I have a lot of different courses coming up actually next year that I'm excited about. Some of them are specific to healing for women, some are for men, some are around money, some are about just actually preparing for your own healing journey using some of my ancestors' indigenous soul healing practices. So you can use this if you have a phone right now, you can actually open up your camera and direct it at the screen, and it actually should actually what I just shared with you about the courses. So I'll give you a second to do that. And then there's one last one, and then I'll come back and take your questions, comments, ahas. Okay, and this one is probably the best by far. This actually will give anyone who would like to have a discovery session with me. You can scan this to your phone and it'll allow you to schedule one with me at your convenience, just because you showed up tonight.
Mhm.
If you have any problems with it, you can email me and actually just let me know that you want to schedule with me, and I will take care of it for you. Otherwise, this is the best way to schedule your discovery session with me.
What is a discovery session compared to a soul reading? Is that available on your website, the discovery session?
The discovery session is not available on my website. It's actually just a few minutes. It's like a 15-minute session with me. If you wanted to actually talk about this evening, something maybe that, that kind of came to your memory, or something that you wanted to go further with, we could do that. Or if there was something actually totally unrelated, maybe something that you've been wondering and you really just wanted some guidance or insight about, that would be the discovery session for you. The soul reading is something totally different than that. It's more, as I said, it's definitely more comprehensive, and it's something that you schedule prior to, and then I actually meditate on your behalf for several days, and then we come together and I actually present it to you. So I don't talk to you at all before the soul reading. If you schedule a soul reading, the beauty in that is that I really showcase my gifts and my ability to connect with your ancestors and Holy Spirit to actually get information for you about where your soul has been. So as we wrap up, we have a few minutes here. We went through, okay, Peggy, I see you. We went through really just looking at how we could start to begin a healing journey now that we've identified what we grew up with and how it impacted us. And now we're looking to literally start to heal by changing the way that we see ourselves in relationship to whatever the emotion that was identified, by looking at the opposite of what we have experienced. Because, as I just stated, in my work, what I have found is that many of us, and I was included, I kept regurgitating what happened to me over and over again. Okay. And so when you do that unconsciously, what you're doing is setting yourself up to continue to repeat it in some form. And so you're literally attracting these things into your life unknowingly. And it's definitely, all it's doing is really just validating whatever it is that you've been saying to yourself about yourself in relationship to the pain and trauma since childhood. It's literally falling in your lap because that's what you're focusing on. So once you decide that you want something different, then you have to do something different. And the easiest way to do that is to start to focus differently. And what you do is look for the opposite of what you've been focusing on. And so if you look up your word and you look up the opposite of that, you're going to find a whole laundry list, like I said, of descriptions, and really just pick the one that feels right for you. The one that is the opposite of whatever it is that you have identified as your experience with whatever it was that you were impacted by growing up. Start there. And you don't have to take on the whole list. Maybe you just focus on one thing and kind of take that one thing and see how far you can get with it. And see if you start to see your life change with that one thing. You're going to be surprised. It's literally going to release you so much. It's going to unburden you. It really is. So, Peggy, you had a question?
Well, one thing, in my 50s, I came to a revelation. I realized that the people in my family and in my life, they were human. They had frailties. They had problems. So I just accepted them as they were.
Yes.
And then moved forward with that. And that's been very helpful. And I just wanted to share that. And I did have one question. Do you do soul clearing?
Now, when you say soul clearing, talk to me about that.
Connections from other dimensional beings that are not helpful, how to cut those, my soul contract for this life, stuff like that.
Oh, okay. No, I don't do that. But
Okay.
when you get the soul reading, should you get a soul reading, the soul reading, I find, actually organically does that as far as releases you from anything that you have been connected to that is not for your higher good. It releases you. It releases you just through the reading.
Okay.
Now, if you have something else, you know, like I have had people reach out to me and tell me that their family has literally, so when we talk about curses, you know, in this vein, I'm not talking about a true hex curse. I'm talking about a spiritual passing down, right? But there have been people who have reached out to me um, believing that, you know, there has been a curse or something that was placed on their family line, and they have asked me, you know, can you remove it? By choice, I choose not to do that. I do know people who can lend their assistance in that, but I choose not to even actually expose myself to dark energies.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Renate, go ahead.
Yes.
I just wanted to ask, do you think I should have a soul reading?
Yes.
Yes, huh? Okay.
Yes.
Thought
For
so.
sure. Yes, for sure.
Okay.
I got the chills again.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. You definitely need to get one as soon as possible. Because every time I talk to you, I get chills. So there's something going on there for sure.
Hmm. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
I feel that.
yes, yes. Did anybody else have any questions about, you know, anything? Or definitely the latter part of identifying and, you know, identifying your soul wounds and actually moving into starting to heal them, because just like Rick said, you know, it's not an overnight, it's not, I know you already know that it's not an overnight fix. However, you know, once you commit to, okay, let me just see, I mean, what do you have to lose, right? Try it out. Take one off your list and say, hey, I'm going to see if this really works. I'm going to look this word up tonight. Tomorrow when I get up, I'm going to look at it and say, this is what I deserve. I deserve to feel loved. I deserve to feel worthy. I want people to offer that to me. I want to offer it to myself. Whatever happened to me as a child had nothing to do with me, you know. Even though it translated into me feeling unworthy, that's not true. You know, so the self-talk has a lot to do with it as well, for sure. What is it that you're telling yourself? What have you been saying to yourself?
I don't have a question, but I did want to say a soul reading really does open up an awareness for you that I didn't have, maybe you all here have, about your ancestors and what they are. It's like they're speaking to you through Deneen, and you become aware of a lot of things about yourself that, and I've been, you know, if we're in this group, it's very likely you've been working on yourself spiritually, emotionally, you know, we have that kind of group, but it does open up something that you also have some kind of release. And I heard what Deneen just said about, you know, the words. I wrote down my words and I realized I organically started to do just that, which is the opposing word,
Mhm.
probably about a year ago. And it was, you know, really close to when I had my reading, because I put a picture of myself as a child, and you know, she's the boss. I tell everybody she's the boss, and I look at that picture of myself every day because we carry so much with us, and the reading really helped me just open up in a huge way. And there's no point, I think, where you go, oh, okay, it's February 19th, 2046, I'm done healing. It's just you're always doing
Yes,
it. You're always
that's right.
going to, but it doesn't control you, and it doesn't take over you, and it's just a
Yes.
wonderful experience to go through the reading, because I was not into ancestry, like I was not into any of that. And she really opened up, certain things about my childhood and my life and my past that, oof, it was like it's huge. I can't say enough about it. And it just organically, things will start happening for you internally and externally,
Mhm.
because you're probably what Waldo is saying. You start living as yourself, the life
Yeah.
you really want, the life that you actually are here to live, not the one that was put upon you or you think was put upon you.
Yes. Yes.
Um,
Yes.
I just wanted to mention that.
Thank you so much.
Yeah,
Thank you so much. I appreciate your words
thank you.
so much.
Dean, excuse me. I just wanted to make some comments about how much, you're just making me think about all these different dimensions and all these different pieces, and thinking about like what's going on in the world, and people are starting to really realize all the pain that they're in. We see it like
Yes.
all over the place, and
Yes.
maybe if we're lucky, there will be more and more healing because people are
Yeah.
bringing it up, and the stages of change. The first stage is acknowledging the fact that there's something wrong.
Yes.
So even though we're going through such difficult times, maybe good things can come about from this as a collective, as human beings. It's
Yes.
great that happens.
Yes. Yes, I pray so.
And also, I kept thinking about it last week, like what the heck was the chart that we did in my mental health class, and it was called a genogram, where
Yes.
we had to write
Yes.
down, all of our ancestors as far as we could remember, and then things about them. And because it was mental health, it was about the traumas that they went through. They were, war or addiction or alcoholism or deaths and things like that. So people can really help themselves if it's on the internet. You can look up how you can do a genogram, and there are like free genograms you can fill out, and you can meditate on that and your ancestors, and think about, this trauma that you've inherited. And I'm glad you brought up the gifts as well, because the older I get, the more I realize the gifts that I got from my ancestors, because I focused on all the negative side, and like my parents were wrong and they did everything wrong. It's all their fault, when you're a teenager. And then as you get older and you experience a little life, you go, oh my God, this is hard, and here I was bitching about how they dealt with things, and look at how I'm dealing with it. And then you realize, the strengths that you got from them too. And like you said, we survived. That's like a big
Yes.
deal. So those are a
is.
lot of the things that have come up for me. And I just really appreciate this work that you're doing.
Oh, thank
It's
you.
really fabulous. And
Thank you.
I don't think it's any
touch with you.
I don't think it's any coincidence that Eris and Chiron are together.
Oh, healing.
Eris, the not fooling around anymore, and Chiron, which is all about the wounds. They're traveling together.
Oh.
Oh, another coincidence. I want to take the time to thank all of you, to thank our guests, especially Deneen, for a wonderful class. And I think you've got a little bit of an idea on how your course is going to go. And thank you for coming. Thank you for coming back, and you're welcome here anytime. We
My honor.
appreciate it. And I wanted to also let people know that with this coming holiday, the way the holiday is falling, this show will be on every Thursday. That we're not going to be missing any because of Christmas and New Year's. So happy holidays to everybody. Remember, we'll be on at 7 o'clock. And remember to follow Deneen up. You go to DeneenJoyner.com and she has all kind of videos and all kind of things waiting for you. And just
Yes.
like Claudia said, I highly recommend her soul work. Get it
Thank you.
done because this ancestral stuff will surprise you.
Yes.
In most cases, I think you didn't even know it was there. And
Right.
it's kind of shocking and surprising. Anyhow, everybody drive carefully, be safe, have a good holiday, and let's thank Deneen once again for being with us.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Deneen.
Thank
See
you.
So
you.
notice it's an
My
hour
honor.
earlier, and this will be on the web in just about an hour.
Thanks,
Good night.
Rick.
Good night.
Many blessings all.
Good night, everybody.
Night.
Thank you.
Take care, everyone.